White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon ignites the tension between President Trump's administration and the media by calling journalists the opposition party that need to, quote, keep their mouths shut. And last night, President Trump piled on.
I've seen now the New York Times, CNN, NBC, they've used the word liar to describe you as it relates if you're talking about crowd size or
They're
voter
very
fraud.
hostile. These are very hostile people. These are very angry people.
But they also colluded against you in the campaign.
Yeah.
And my question to you
Well, they're
is...
very dishonest people. The media is very dishonest. I've been saying it. I say it openly.
I said journalism's dead, so we agree.
Never dead, but they're very dishonest people.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's bring in editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire and Breitbart's former editor-at-large, Ben Shapiro, and host of CNN's Reliable Sources, Brian Stelter. Welcome to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Ben, I want to start with you. Steve Bannon's comments. First of all, your initial thoughts.
Well, I mean, I think that Steve's, first of all, I think you actually quote Steve completely. So when you say that he says the media should shut up, what he actually said is the media should shut up and listen more to the American people so that they can get better at their job, was essentially trying to say, look, I'm not, as everyone knows, I'm not a big Steve Bannon defender. I'm not a big Steve Bannon fan. He's one of the worst people I personally know, but that has nothing to do with what he's saying here. I think that what he's actually saying here is not entirely incorrect. There is a vast gap between the media's perception of itself and the public perception of the media. The reason Trump keeps picking fights with the media is because it's a fight he can win. The American people don't actually trust the media at this point, mainly because the media seem like they're representing their own interests. We're like a separate class, as opposed to people who are defending the interests of the American people. And the more we get into slap fights with the administration, the more we get into slap fights with politicians on behalf of the press, on behalf of the media, instead of on behalf of the American people, the more the American people are going to be likely to just ignore it. The more they're just going to say, okay, it's another slap fight, right?
I understand where you're coming from, and I understand there's a lack of trust in media, but people are certainly watching us, Brian, because if you add up the numbers of CBS, NBC, ABC, and CNN, there are millions of viewers, right?
Yeah, this is just the data for the nightly newscast. I tried to pick 6:30 p.m. because it's the best way to show who's tuning in every night. This is NBC, ABC, CBS, plus CNN at that hour, about 27 million on an average night last week. Now, that's a snapshot in time, right? Not everybody tunes in every day. Over time, most of the country is still paying attention to these traditional media outlets, as well as new digital outlets like the one Ben's at, like the Huffington Post and the BuzzFeeds and the Daily Callers of the world. You know, there's a very complicated media ecosystem out there now, and I think, you know, we hear Trump kind of attacking the media in general, but there is no one media, and there is no one American people. Many Americans are demanding that the press fact-check the new president. But at the same time, many Americans are skeptical of the press. You know, it's a very complicated situation.
Let me put this by you, Ben. If a media entity is a cheerleader for Donald Trump and never puts his feet to the fire, won't you lose the trust of the American public too if you continue to do that consistently?
I certainly would hope so. I mean, I think that here's the thing. Every White House treats opposing media as the opposition. The Trump White House, I think, rightly looks at a lot of the mainstream media and says, you guys were the opposition during the campaign. You're still the opposition now. You don't particularly like me. And so you're going to be much more critical of me than friendly outlets like Fox News, for example. But the job of the media should be to understand that we're always the opposition. If we're the fourth estate and it's our job to check the government and it's our job to check the White House, it shouldn't matter whether you like or dislike the person in the White House particularly. You should be treating the White House as your opposition. The fact that the media did not treat President Obama as much as the opposition as they are President Trump is giving Trump the opening to slap you guys around. And I think that he's largely correct in slapping the media around by saying that there is a bias that exists for Trump that didn't exist for Obama. The best way to respond to that for the media is not to defend ourselves by saying, well, that's an attack on the press, that's an attack on the media. It's to say, okay, look, say what you're going to say. It's either true or it's false. And then treat it as a true-false statement as opposed to a fight between the media and Donald Trump, because he's going to win that fight every time, at least in the minds of the public. The trucker from Michigan does not care if the media gets it.
I understand what you're saying, but here's the difficulty for us, Brian, and I think you'll agree. When there is a blatant untruth told by President Trump, for example, the crowd size at the inauguration, should we not call him out on that and ignore it because it doesn't really matter? Or in calling it out, does it make us seem like we're opposing him in some way, since we're not giving him the benefit of the doubt for something really inconsequential.
Right, you're making it sound like a no-win situation, but I think the majority of Americans want us to be showing the evidence, showing the photos in that case, showing the video, and letting the facts stand wherever they may be. This is a president who has a 36% approval rating, according to Quinnipiac, 40% according to CNN's poll before the inauguration. This is not a president that the majority of the country wants to only hear positive news. Yes, there are some viewers who only want to hear the positive. That is actually a minority, and I think we need to keep in mind there are many different constituencies, many different audiences that want different kinds of news right now in this very divided America.
Okay, interesting topic. Thanks to both of you for stopping by. Ben Shapiro, Brian Stelter. Still
Message. Ben, I read something like that, Donald Trump saying this should not happen, and I think that has a chilling effect for artistic expression. After all, these performers were up on stage. They were performing art, even when they were speaking to the vice president-elect. Do you agree?
Oh, well, I mean, it isn't my favorite thing.
Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
I'm sorry, it isn't my favorite thing, and I would recommend that, you know, conservatives who look at President Trump doing this, President-elect Trump doing this, and saying, well, it seems okay to me, just imagine if the shoe were on the other foot for a second and it were Barack Obama lecturing NASCAR fans if he got booed at some sort of NASCAR event. You know, it doesn't seem totally appropriate for the President-elect of the United States to be doing this. On the other hand, you know, I would recommend that the media sort of take a second look at how much focus they put on things like this, because the fact is that if you're going to turn it all the way up to 11 on a Hamilton tweet, yeah, this is going to be a long presidency for all of you.
Is that what you think happened on Saturday and again today? We've turned it up to 11?
Yeah, I think that you guys have been. I think the mainstream media has been at 11 since the election, and I think that you know that means that there's no place to turn it from there. I mean, this is sort of the problem in the 2016 election. I think there are a lot of aspersions cast at Mitt Romney. And then when you came back in 2016 and cast the same aspersions at Donald Trump, who's a very different candidate, a lot of people just tuned it out. I really think that the media is in danger of blowing its credibility if they're going to be so exuberant about covering every aspect of Trump's foibles, because there are going to be some things he does that are actually probably not very good, and you're going to want people to pay attention to it. And if you pay the same amount of attention to a Hamilton tweet that you do for example, something I think is significantly more troubling, you know, President-elect Trump meeting with business partners from India while he's the President-elect, you know, that seems to me something where you ought to be putting more focus if you're going to actually, you know, point out problems here.
Charles, do you agree?
If their employees all thought that God's will was the same thing that the owners of Hobby Lobby think God's will is, there wouldn't be an issue here, would they? Because they could give the insurance, whatever insurance, and they could rest assured that their employees would choose like they would.
The question in Hobby Lobby is whose freedom is being infringed upon. Employees' freedom is not infringed upon when they enter into a consensual relationship with an employer that includes certain types of health care.
Not consensual.
Of course it is. They can quit. Who is forcing them? Where is the gun? Where is the gun? Who is forcing them? Where is the chain? Who is locking them to their desk?
Stop with the gun language.
The reason that I use the gun language is because locking them to their desk.
Stop with the gun language.
The reason that I use the gun language is the reason that I use the gun language is because it is vitally important for people to understand that every government measure at the end of the day it must be compelled by force. That's what government measures are for. There is a vast difference, a huge difference in terms of personal liberty and freedom between the government compelling behavior and a company saying that we are not going to provide certain types of coverage, and if you don't like that, you can quit or buy your own coverage. There's a vast difference. The gun's the whole issue.
I'm feeling really powerful right now.
For sure, by the way.
You're going to submit to us. Our time of liberalism is here. You drink that fluoride. You take those vaccines. Donald Trump says vaccines might be dangerous because one of his kids got hurt. Shut up! You don't have free speech. You understand? You listen to me. I rule this country now. I'm liberal. Screw him. Ban his free speech right now. Ban it! Let me tell you what else you do. You don't visit InfoWarsLife.com with the #1 new vitamin.
And brilliant seg. I mean, he segues right into an ad for some sort of fusion vitamin, so that's great. This guy, by the way, is considered a leading Trump ally, Alex Jones.
I don't know why. I can't understand it. Look at this. Look what's underneath here. It's another shirt. Why? Why? Because I don't want to go to the cleaners that often. That's why. Come on. Okay, so it's just, I think it says something about our country when that guy is a leading is a leading advocate for one of the president.
No, I mean, it isn't. This is actually how a lot of millennials think, and this is how the Occupy Wall Street movement thinks. This is a group of people who graduated with degrees in lesbian dance theory and then were surprised when they didn't get a six-figure paycheck out of college. I mean, this is, unfortunately, they were getting a paycheck consummate with their education level. The problem is that if you have to be productive in a capitalist society in order to earn anything. And this is, unfortunately, a lazy generation, a generation that expects things. And ignorant and communist is no way to go through life.
Most dealers are good. Gun dealers are good. Let me finish. But the NRA has all but neutered the ATF. All but neutered. And there are, well, we haven't had an ATF director for the last 10 years. We haven't had an ATF director for the last 10 years because the NRA won't even allow us to have a Surgeon General because the guy wanted common sense gun control.
Well, the ATF is a little bit busy smuggling guns south of the border to the drug cartels.
Oh, come on.
And say whether or not he should be considered someone who is a hero and inspirational to other young men out there.
Well, here's actually the problem that I have. I think that you can accept and tolerate people's behavior, and that, demonstrates non-homophobia. I think that it is ridiculous to suggest that just because you're not celebrating, on the cover of Sports Illustrated, somebody coming out of the closet, and you think, it's relatively unimportant in the grand scheme of things because people should be able to live their lives the way that they want. I don't really understand. There were folks who were saying that was a homophobic tweet. I'm still confused as to how it's homophobic simply to say that you don't think it's a heroic move in today's America to come out of the closet the same way that it was maybe 20 years ago.
Some people making below $15 an hour make ends meet by receiving government benefits in the form of food stamps and or other subsidies. Some assert that this essentially means governments have enabled businesses to pay less and keep more for their bottom lines, resulting in subsidized corporate profits and people more dependent on government. Ben Shapiro, as a conservative who advocates for less dependency on government, why do you object to this reasoning?
I don't object to that reasoning. I think it's 100% true. I think the major problem that we have with regard to food stamps supplementing people's wages is that these companies are being paid off by the government. I mean, they're getting enormous subsidies from the federal government in the form of food stamps, and there are two ways that you can correct that in terms of wages. The first way that you can correct that in terms of wages would be with a measure like the minimum wage, which, as we'll argue about tonight, decreases, in my opinion, employment. The evidence, I believe, tends to show that it decreases employment, or at the very least puts a cap on it and makes it more difficult for small businesses to operate while big businesses are still getting these subsidies. And second of all, it creates a corrupt system where certain businesses benefit more than others. The second way that you're going to be able to prevent all of this is if you cut back a lot of these subsidies, forcing businesses to compete for labor. Labor is just like any other good in a free market. That means that people have to compete for it. So if you want wages to go up, then get rid of the government paying the other half of the wage, and you will see the wages automatically increase. I think that we should all be able to agree on the idea that wages need to increase. I think the difference is that the way to make wages increase is to have a fully consensual relationship between employer and employee. And I think this is really the root of the morality of minimum wage when it comes down to it. And in two sentences here is that I would never force an employee to work for an employer at a given wage. That violates the 13th Amendment and constitutes slavery or indentured servitude. By the same token, I would never force an employer to pay a given wage to an employee, because that is a lack of consent on the part of the employer and violates basic principles of fairness as well as freedom.
And when it comes to college admissions, for example, there are more women than men going to college. That's correct. When it comes to graduate schools, there are more women than men going to graduate schools. Okay, when it comes to jail, which you just cited, the vast, well over 90% of the people in jail are men. Is that because the system is sexist against men? That the jailing system is now sexist against men because there are more men than women in prison? That's really your argument.
It does have to also be the case that more men commit crimes.
There you go.
let me tell you a little bit about the precedent in California for a second. In California, there are 30,000 mentally ill people who have guns. They have a grand total of 33 people, really, in the state of California who are tasked with taking these 30,000 guns away from these 30,000 mentally ill people. Okay, we're creating a system that is either not going to be enforced or it's going to be over-enforced. This idea, if we can just trust the government, then why aren't we just trusting the government to do the right thing now? I don't understand why a piece of legislation makes them better at what they do. I mean, the government is not very good at what they're doing now. Why does new wording make them not suck?
Because part of the reason...